All right, guys, welcome to the Bass U brunch portion of the Kayak Adventure Series from Wild Whitehall. Yeah! Woo! This is great. We got, man, probably have close to 50 people here, all said and done. So that's pretty cool to see this many people showing up for, you know, an educational experience, which is obviously a big part of this entire weekend of festivities, not just a tournament, a festival, a Bass U brunch here where you guys can learn with seminars, get breakfast. So huge shout out to my father-in-law Ramon for cooking on the grill over there. So, awesome. That was good. That food was really good, man. I was impressed. But and then also wanted to thank obviously Waterdog. Steve will be out in a minute. We can thank him. But you know, they just opened up their doors to us, and great folks up here. The entire community obviously has been really great. So I'm excited. Before I announce our first speaker, Jeff Little, I just do want to mention a couple things. Tomorrow at the festival at 2 o'clock when we start the festival, which you guys won't get there at 2 unless you had a really, really good day and you're so confident you're going to win this thing, you got off the water early. But we start at 2 for the community just so we can get things rolling. You guys will get back at 3:30, 4:30, 5 o'clock, depending on where you're at and how long of a paddle or motor out you have to even get to your ramp. So get back here. But at the festival we'll have raffle tickets to raise money, continue to raise money for pediatric cancer, and someone's going to win that New Canoe U10 over there, so that's a pretty cool boat. So shout out to New Canoe for donating that. Thank you guys. And then also, you know, you were just asking about how do you win this bike over here. That's our Angler of the Year prize, that bike from Ubco. So you guys can test drive that tomorrow at the festival at the demo there. It's going to be pretty cool. There'll be Toyota trucks there to demo. There'll be bounce houses, fire trucks, I mean, all kinds of craziness. So bring the family and the kids is what I'm saying. It's going to be a good time. You don't want to miss out on that. And of course, kayak demos through Waterdog. Feel Free Kayaks will be there. So that's all the stuff. We will give you your identifier code at the end of this when we wrap up, probably around 12:30. We'll give you that code so you guys can write it in. I'm sure Steve's got a Sharpie in here somewhere. You guys can go ahead and write it on your identifier. And yeah, just get out there on the water. And I'm excited though to talk about some smallmouth. You know, smallmouth very well could win this tournament today. It could be all smallmouth, could be all largemouth, but well, I guess we'll find out. It could be a mixed bag. But we're going to talk about smallmouth. We got, you know, obviously the Smalley Talk podcast guys at Sheegan brand. You know, Josh Chrenko here representing all things smallmouth. So we figured this would be a cool seminar topic to do, right? When we're up here where big smallmouth lives. So we got 3 guys that know how to catch them pretty good. Jeff Little, Josh, and myself. Jeff's going to talk first. And what we figured would be most important is to talk about not the obvious stuff that we all know where smallmouth, you know, love to live. Everyone knows and can see the obvious stuff in rivers and lakes. It's more about where these subtle kind of areas or subtle techniques, anything subtle that maybe over the years we've learned, and in a tournament setting that I've always figured out and learned, that's the difference in winning. That's it. It's these getting you a little extra here or there. I always make the stupid analogy of Olympic swimmers at one point. I don't know if it was like 60s or 70s or when, they started shaving the hair off their bodies. And they were like, well, that's crazy. Well, someone figured out that they gained like 1/10 of a second or whatever, 2/10 of a second by being more, I mean, hydrodynamic, right? No, less drag in the water.
I would gain more.
Yeah, you would gain more, okay. So much more, I'm sure. But that's kind of the point for tournament fishing to me in this seminar. It's let's get you guys a little bit here, a little bit there, a little extra advantage with some subtle stuff. And things that we don't always share all the time because that might be something that's we hold kind of close to our chest, and we only want to let it go at places like this. When you guys have come, you paid for the food, the experience, so we want to make sure you guys get the best in return, the best information. So again, last thing I'll say is thanks to Bass University for sponsoring the Bass U Brunch. They're a great educational platform. You guys can go check them out online and you know, register for Bass U. Their seminars are great. They have Bass U Kayak now, so they actually have kayak anglers and do focus and care about kayak. Even though obviously a lot of the information it applies. It doesn't really matter what, you know, the fish don't know what you're fishing out of, right? But there are certain things about kayak in terms of boat control and stuff that some of the Bass U seminars you know, can help out with. So let's get started with Jeff Little. Let's talk about some subtle things that you're going to share that you've learned over the years, man. Let's get to it.
Thanks, Drew. My name's Jeff Little. I actually work for Boondocks. We manufacture kayak fishing accessories like the T-bone and the landing gear, and we're going to be doing a lot more in I'll say truck camping. That's really what boondock it really means. Boondocking, camping out of your truck, which is something that's important to us when we travel and do these kayak trails. And privileged to fish lots of different river smallmouth fisheries across the country. And I fished the Columbia River. Actually, Josh and I were watching the video from this time last year of the Columbia River on the Oregon and Washington border. Wildly different type of river smallmouth fishery than a lot of different places that I fish. I would say, we fished the lower end of the Muskegon and with like the backwater type bay type areas that are more marshy and going through the grassland, the little braided areas, like that was wildly different than a lot of the, where I'm from. I live in Maryland and I fish the Susquehanna a good bit, but I fish a lot of other little places along the way where I will do boondocks dealer visits along the way. I'll do dealer visits for 4 days and then I'll fish somewhere. Sometimes it's just an afternoon, sometimes it's like, okay, it's Sunday, no one who is a buyer at any of these stores is around, so I'm not going to do dealer visits. I'm going to take a whole day and fish, and I'll just pick a river and go. Those are some of my favorite trips because you never know what you're going to get. Sometimes it's a dud, sometimes it's a fishery that's so-so, and sometimes you just knock it out of the park and just have an amazing day of fishing that you really didn't expect. And it really comes down to having that ethic of exploration is the phrase I use, is that willingness to, hey, I'm just going to pick a spot and go. And maybe I find that diamond in the rough, that gem of a fishery that's just amazing. It's what you always hope for. But I enjoy exploring and fishing river smallmouth wherever I am in the country. I do a lot in Appalachia in general, but I've done the Ozark Mountain, the Ozarks is an area, and obviously, the upper Midwest has a lot of really great, you guys know if you're local, a lot of great river smallmouth fisheries. What I want to talk about though are places that there are things on a river, and I'm going to talk specifically about summertime river smallmouth hidden magnets, right? Places that it really comes down to, hey, you're moving along and you're like, oh my God, they're all there. Why are they all there? And I will talk about a trip I did down in Tennessee, and it was, I think this was summer before last, and I just randomly picked a river, put my Torpedo on, and rolled up. And a lot of times I will run with a Torpedo on, clear water, put my polarized glasses on, and just look. And if I'm scattering carp, there's probably some smallmouth mixed in there. That first one is such an important pattern. Is you run in the clear water and you look for carp, and you fish as though you're trying to catch the carp. Yeah, you're not going to catch the carp. What you can catch are these big bruiser smallmouth that just hang out 6 feet, 10 feet, sometimes 20 feet back. And they're just, the carp are here. There'll be 3 or 4 big ones, and they're grubbing, mucking up the bottom, and there's a big mud plume. You find that mud plume, there's a carp. When there's a bunch of carp, there's a smallmouth hanging back saying, "Well, flip that rock for me. I bet there's something for me to eat in there." And they're not as fast. They knock it over, and the crayfish go scooting, or the mad Tom and the Helgermite, and they're just like, "Oh, there it is!" And wham, they grab it, and the carp's like, "Man, that was mine." But they're smart. They're gonna get into, they're gonna tail these carp around. And I know I actually watch it a good bit on the Susquehanna. If I can't find active feeding fish any other way, and it just seems like it's the heat of the day and they're just not active, find some carp. And really what I'm doing at that point is I'm going to do a dead stick soft plastic presentation, lead that carp, put it out there, usually like a 4-inch scented jerk shad, and just let that thing sit and kind of waver back and forth in the current, or a Ned rig or a finesse jig or something that you put it out there, and you just set it as a trap, and you just wait, and you see the carp go by, and he moves by, and then the smallmouth comes in, and it's like, oh, you missed that, I'll take it. And you gotta know in that that happens. You got to be focusing on it and know where you placed it. And you can see that black tail. Sometimes you don't see the whole fish, you just see his tail move into an area. And then you'll see him just turn a little bit. You see that little flash, you're like, okay, boom, there he is. So carp are very important. It's a moving target, but it is a hidden smallmouth magnet for especially summer river smallmouth. On that same Tennessee river, that same flow, I found another area that not only had carp, but it had catfish, it had some kind of bluegill species, and just loads and loads of smallmouth. And I fished the area really thoroughly. I anchored up and I hung back. It would be like the distance of like from here to the other side of the gravel over there. I was like, I don't want to get real close. There was some overhanging, you know, branches from trees, but I was skipping up in there, and I'm like, there's rocks, and there's it kind of drop off into some depth, and there's a log in there that's submerged, but it didn't look like anything different than anything else I had seen in that mile and a half that I had cruised up. I had been, you know, moving with a torpedo and looking. I do that, what I call, instead of saying crash and burn, it's crash and learn. I move fast with a torpedo and I crash into the spot and see what scatters, right? And you're like, I'm not gonna catch these 3 big fish that I saw move out of, but I'm like, okay, at least I can get the pattern information of that's the type of location where they were. In this particular case, I didn't crash it. I didn't scatter those fish, but I knew, hey, I caught one as soon as I put something in there. Second cast, I caught another, right? Something was going on there, and I really didn't know what was going on, but I was catching fish after fish after fish in this section that's probably, you know, half the length of the building, like from here to that end of the building. That was, you know, the bank that was just productive. But one area in particular, I would watch them run laps, and they would always come back and hang out in this one spot that was about the size that I could park my truck. I really pounded it for 2 hours, and it just kept reloading, and I didn't understand until I got over there, and I anchored up, and the wind started pushing me, and I take my feet, and my foot, flop it over the inflatable, and I dig in. I'm like, oh, that's cold. That's really cold water, and it's a hot day. What's happening? There was a spring there, a big, you know, and probably coming out in 3 or 4 different places. On a hot day, the spring is this lovely refuge for them to just go in and stay cool. The oxygen levels stay up. It's just a magnet for all life. In particular, rivers that we have that have the muskie, they like it. There's areas too. If you see a bunch of muskie in an area, there's probably a spring. Sometimes it'll be a river that comes in, or a small creek or tributary that as springs further upstream. There's one of those on the Susquehanna that I hit every time. That, you know, I will run a route, you know, with the motor and run up one side of the island. I'm like, I know I got to hit that little creek there, because there's either going to be, you know, there's going to be some big smallmouth, and there's probably going to be 3 or 4 muskie laying right at the front, cheek to cheek, just laying there like someone would, you know, on a super hot day, position themselves right in front of the window AC unit, right, just trying to cool off. But springs are critically important. If you have one of those, you know, it's just going to be that magnet of all life, including the big smallmouth. So, and really the first time I really put that together was fishing the Shenandoah down in Virginia, and I was putting 2 and 2 together in terms of muskie fishing, and really saying, all right, these are the areas where the muskies are, and there'll be different sections of the river that have more springs. But if you can occasionally put your foot in, or if you have your graph that has the temperature log, keep an eye on that. If you know that consistently you have 73-degree water, and all of a sudden it's like, you know, 64, something's going on there. And if you can find springs, those are amazing smallmouth magnets, especially in the summertime. Another one is shade. So if I were to say shade is important because, you know, on a sunny day, I mean, they don't have eyelids, they can't squint their eyes in bright sunlight, so they're happier in shade visually. But it's cooler water, it's concealment. If you're, you know, if they're on that border of shade and sun, sometimes that's an ambush point for them as predators. So you know, it's cooler water that keeps the oxygen levels up. But when I say shade, what would cause shade that you would look for and say, all right, I'm going to fish the shade there? Give me an example. Trees. Trees is I think probably the most obvious. You're fishing the bank and you want where the river winds back and forth. You know, there'll be one side on the outside bend that the shade, you know, coming off here, it comes out a good bit, but then you turn and then the sun hits it. When you have a length of bank that has been in the shade for a long period of time, there's more of that cool water the longer you go. Whereas if it switches back and forth, none of it really gets that cool because it's all moving. So the length of bank shade from trees is very important. When you have a tributary coming into a bigger river, you have shade on both sides of that. So that tributary is coming out and it's going to be cooler. So the tributaries having that cooler water can be a fish magnet as well. But yeah, there are times where the only way you're catching fish is skipping soft plastics or whatever you have deep into the shade. How far up underneath that tree canopy, you know, can you target, you know, those fish that enjoy the shade? But that's not the only example of shade. What else can you think of that causes a shadow? Bridge pilings is a great one. And I've actually watched fish line up on you know, the bridge is behind you, the sun's coming in, and you can see the sunlight here, and then the smallmouth are just lined up in that shade, and as the sun moves, they kind of move with it. So for sure, bridge pilings is a big one. What else?
The bank.
The bank. So like a high bluff bank, and it kind of undercuts. Great example, for sure.
Sometimes even little ones, they'll have that little undercut.
The little undercut, and you said rocks. Sometimes you'll be out in the middle and say this New Canoe U10 here is that big boulder that, like, the river level's up here and you can see the top of that. They're going to be in the shade in the undercut. So down there, if you can stand up in your kayak and just drift and look and say, where are those dark little seams? You know, if you can take a fluke and drift it, and it just kind of wanders in there and it drifts into that shade that is, otherwise the whole area has lots of sunlight. You're just thinking, I gotta do the tree shade or whatever else it is. You're missing that smaller example of shade of that big boulder or logs, submerged logs is a big one. One that most people miss, and I actually got to film Jody Queen down on the New River last summer. He really capitalized on this type of shade. Is the vegetation, is when you have plant life. And not only does it create shade, and if you have the wild celery or the eelgrass or milfoil or whatever different plant species, and you got a lot of diverse subaquatic and terrestrial vegetation in these rivers. Really great plant life up here. Really healthy rivers. But the current will be going this way, and you'll have it anchored here, and it'll just kind of be flowing there. So many of those fish will just tuck right up underneath it. And they got a little umbrella for themselves individually. Not only is that shade, and it holds on to the oxygen that's naturally there, the brighter and sunnier it gets, the more those plants are giving off oxygen. So they're even happier. So it's kind of like double dipping on the oxygen from shade and that plant giving off oxygen. He fished the tournament, and I think everyone had a really good morning top water bite, getting them on on the Chapos and the shower blows and the buzz baits and everyone, you know, and Jody didn't do that great in the beginning. Like his mornings were not what he had hoped they would be. And where everyone else kind of struggled midday, they get into, all right, the sun's up, my top water bite died, you know, and I'm around other people and I can see them catching and him not catching early. And then as the day wore on and the sun came up and he's like, I got that right depth, like 5 to 7 foot with the grass coming up and that it anchored up in there. And he was just flipping this little jig and he would see a big clump of grass and pitch it out there and just bring it right along the edge. And it you know, it would come right along, he'd come out and grab it, and he was whacking big fish. So don't overlook the grass as understand that each little tuft of grass is a little umbrella that gives them even more oxygen. The brighter and sunnier it gets, that is going to give them the shade and the oxygen that they need. And it was a cool moment because I'm filming him for the YouTube channel. If you don't already subscribe to the YouTube channel that I post things on, it's called The Little Stuff, and there's a lot of instructional how-to stuff there, and kayak reading things as well. But it was fun filming Jody and seeing him really do well when everyone else stopped catching midday. So,
Good question, Jeff.
yes, sir.
In that situation, you always drift down to that, or you actually bring it up also on the surface to get it to come up?
So, in fishing those submerged vegetation clubs, he actually anchored up.
Okay.
And he was quartering up at a 40. The current's going this way, quartering up at a 45 degree where he'd see one and let it trickle down, and then one straight up, and then one to the right. Pull his anchor up, paddle up a little bit more, and hit another one. So he was downstream, casting up to it and moving it in the direction the current was flowing and bringing it right alongside the grass.
That works great with the steelhead with fly rod, but I never thought of bass doing the same thing.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yep. River fish are river fish.
Yeah.
So one last one that I want to talk about, and I know that this has been in a lot of my videos and some videos that I probably originally made 15 plus years ago, and it's a term that I started using. I know Drew likes to mention the term, but is laminar flow.
We need a t-shirt with that on it.
Laminar flow is, so a lot of these rivers we have, you know, here's the surface and here's the bottom, and you have a rock, and a rock, you know, creates something that creates turbulence, and the water kind of changes direction constantly. Laminar flow is when there's not the change in direction. It's the absence of turbulence with flow, right? So here's the top and here's the bottom. The speed that this water is moving straight across is the same as part way down, is middle of the water column is same as the bottom. Usually it's a gravel glide or a sandbar, or it's something where there's no structure, cover, anything out there. And you look at it and you see a big smallmouth or 2 or 3 and you're like, why? Why are you there? There's no reason for you to be there. And I was paddling through here as quick as I can because I said, this is not an area I want to fish. Devoid of any reason a smallmouth would hang up here. No ambush points, no oxygen creating vegetation, no shade, no nothing. Why? Why is he there? You got an idea? Yeah, there might be some bait fish out there cruising, but they're like push water that accelerates before drop is better for that. Laminar flow is a hidden fish magnet for one reason only. It is where they go to be as lazy as they possibly can. It is energy conservation. All they want to do is sit in there and have the right amount of flow pass in their mouth and over their gills, and not have to work against current to maintain that position. It is a very inactive place they go. A lot of times in the middle of the day, in the heat of the day, and it's the productive, flat bottom, nothing water that has the best laminar flow has a current speed, whereas if there was a leaf that was on the surface, it's going to move at this speed right here. I'm sure that's temperature dependent, and maybe in colder water it could move even slower. But it is water that is moving, top, bottom, middle, all at the same speed, nothing bumpy or turbulent, and there's a lot of it out there. A lot of times it's closer towards the end of the pool where you're just like, yeah, we're done fishing this. But the last, I don't know, 100 yards, maybe only 50 yards, and you're like, there's nothing out there except for 3 giant smallmouth.
Do you define that as like, I call it smally speed water. That's what I've always called it.
Yeah.
Find smallmouth in it, but identifying it from like your boat, do you see just a little tension on top of the water? Is that, or is it slower than that?
I can read that there is flow.
Right.
I will find something that tells me, but it's not as obvious as where you see turbulence across, like if there's a couple softball size little cobbles.
Too fast.
Well, if it's not a flat bottom, you can see that turbulence a lot easier. When it's laminar flow,
You won't have any white, nothing like churning up the
No.
water. It's just like kind of flat line.
Yeah.
There's a lot of it yesterday.
there was a lot of it yesterday, and I looked for it, and it plays out more prominently in certain fisheries than others. But it's hard for me to tell you what to do to capture those fish, other than the idea that you don't want to write it off. When you see it out there, if you're able to stand up in your kayak and look out and you see across there, don't assume that hey, it's dead water, especially in the last 100 yards of a long pool. That's a whole other different discussion, but the end of the pool is always worth your attention, especially in summer. My approach to that has always been it's clear water, long cast, usually either something that I would launch out like a weighted fluke where I would dead stick it, because when you launch it and it hits, there's nothing out there that they would look over and know that something happened. Say, oh, what happened? Where'd it go? Oh, I missed it. It got caught in the crevice in that lawn. No, there's nothing out there. So if you come in with something big, whack, and then let it sit, and then maybe let it swing in the current, they're gonna find it because it's the only thing out there. So that's one approach. The other is to just go in hot and fast and throw your buzzbait, your chop bone. In my case, what I usually do is that 7-inch center jerk shad, where I can launch that a long way and I ski it on top. If you haven't watched the video, the thumbnail says selfish. The word is selfish. It's where I figured out just taking a big fluke, a 7-inch Z-Man center jerk shad, and chucking it and just keeping it on the surface. I'm not walking the dog with it. I'm chucking it, keep the nose up, and I'm just reeling so it just skis across like that. It just runs straight and fast. That's one thing I will do in laminar flow. The reason why that was called, they had the thumbnail selfish, I almost didn't publish it because I'm like, this is too good. But that is laminar flow, and the more you know that it's out there and know that it's something that big smallmouth will go to in the middle of the day to conserve energy. That's the only reason, but you can get them to eat. The more it's on your radar, you're not going to overlook it. But in recap, what are the other ones that I mentioned? Go ahead and put your hand up if you can think of other ones that what are the hidden magnets out there that we've talked about today? Go ahead.
Foliage.
Yep.
Foliage, weeds.
Yep, the
Weeds,
vegetation, the grass, shade.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Submerged vegetation,
Yep.
wood, logs.
What else? Water temperature, the springs. The springs are such a, if you can find a spring, you're always going to find good fish there. So just keep those in mind, you know, as you get into the summer months and fish them. And I encourage each of you, if you haven't already subscribed to the Little Stuff, please do that. There's a whole lot of river smallmouth content in there that is educational in nature. It's not just my knowledge. I like to film others, and that's what I'm doing today. And to get, you know, other people teaching what their expertise is, and I have a lot of really great sticks on there that teach stuff. I know Josh gave me a tutorial yesterday on his fluke fishing with the nose weighted hook, and I learned some things, and it's good. I didn't rely just on my knowledge. I recruited some of his for the Little Stuff. So I appreciate you guys listening to me today, and I wish you luck in the tournament. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. We're going to get Josh up here now. He's going to talk about some other subtle stuff that he's learned over the years. So, Josh, here you go.
Oh, is this for me?
Sure.
Sounds good. How you guys doing?
Yeah, man.
So I will take a little bit of, does that look good? Okay. First, I guess before I get started, I wanted to, because I'll forget about this. So a buddy of mine owns this company called Broken Twig. Does anybody have these nets? Okay, so you know, there's a couple guys that know about them. So they're for sale in here. Steve said he would give you guys 10% off if you want to grab one, but they're basically, they are recycled broken hockey sticks. So these are carbon fiber handles, and you can obviously see that he has a little cool puck that he uses as the joint here. But they are like the lightest freaking nets that you can find, because they're like $500 hockey sticks, you know, that he recycled. So if you guys have a crappy net or no net at all and you want to grab one, they're in there. I have like 5 of them. I have one for my jet boat, one for the kayak, you know, and then a bunch of spares. So if you guys want to check them out, they are in there. So I wanted to mention that. Sorry, I should probably show them for the video here. We're gonna tag them on social media. But Broken Twig is the name of the company. Just giving you guys a little introduction of myself. My name's Josh Chrenko. So I'm from Indiana. I live just south of Indianapolis. Our smallmouth fishing sucks there, so don't travel to Indiana to catch smallmouth. But I host a Smalley Talk podcast. If you guys are into like smallmouth, we probably more cater towards river guys. If you like river smallmouth stuff, we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, that sort of thing. Check us out. I own a Chegan brand, so we're the official brand of smallmouth bass. If you see a jet boat tomorrow ripping by you with the big Chegan thing on the side, that's me. I'll be running around like taking photos and videos of you guys tomorrow. I'll try not to throw a 110 Whopper Plopper in front of you when I stop, but and then I do some tournaments. I fish out of kayaks quite a bit. I honestly fish out of anything that goes catch smallmouth. I'm the reigning Bassmaster Susquehanna champion of Beat Drew, so I had to put that on my resume. Yeah, so the kind of what I want to talk about today, I'm going to try to condense it a little bit, and I will say this, like, I don't want to sit up here and just talk. If you guys like want to speak up, ask questions during it, I like interaction more than anything, so feel free to speak up while I'm up here. But I'm going to try to keep it to like 2 subjects. One, I'll talk about kind of the subject here is like subtle things where smallmouth are, subtle places where smallmouth are and where you can catch them. I have like one very specific thing I'm going to talk about that actually is going on right now that you guys, I did not see any yesterday, but when it happens, it's a very short period of time. It's easy to find, and it's a pretty cool way to catch a big smallmouth, but it's only for like a couple weeks of the year. So it's something to talk about. And then I have a rig. Do you guys want to see the rig first or the place first? Which you want to see? I have kind of a secret rig. I'm going to show you. It's called the Chrenko rig. They call it. You want to see the rig first?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So.
Just tab over on my computer when you want to get to the gear stuff all in one.
Yeah.
Sit there.
Okay, sounds good. So people call this a Chrenko rig. I don't know that I'm the one that started it. I would say maybe I perfected it. I didn't start it, but how many of you guys throw flutes? Okay. All right. Also, I forgot to ask this. Like, raise of hands. Who would consider themselves more of a lake guy than a smallmouth guy, or river guy? So the lake guys, river guys, raise your hands higher. Okay, really? That's actually surprising. I would thought this would be more river guys. So I will start off by saying this. River smallmouth, if you don't fish for river smallmouth very much, they are not like what you think of when you think of lake smallmouth. So lake smallmouth are kind of like, you catch them up shallow in the springtime, when they're pre-spawn, getting ready to spawn, and then they go deep and you're drop shotting for them or Ned rigging for them, like using live scope. River smallmouth are like pre-spawn lake smallmouth the entire year long. Like you catch them on buzz baits, flukes, spinner baits, that sort of thing. They don't have any place to go deep, so a lot of the fishing that I do is more of like your shallow water type stuff. So I have 2 graphs on my jet boat that I like look at temperature, and that's it. Like I never like try to read the bottom. So this is definitely more catered towards river stuff, so I wanted to preface that. You could obviously catch lake smallmouth on these, but so flutes are soft jerk baits. They're available at like every Walmart, in America, pretty readily available. They're pretty versatile. You can use them for about anything. How do you guys rig your flukes mostly? Weightless Texas rig, like a wide gap. So that's how I used to like fish flukes. Like growing up, fishing for largemouth, I would, 4-aught wide gap hook. I'd rig it and fish it weightless a lot. And then I actually saw a video one time of a guy was like, one of Jeff's buddies, Juan, had a video and he was talking about nose hooking a fluke. And I had always had trouble hooking up a smallmouth on wide gap hooks. And I don't know if it's just the way they eat and the size of their mouth and getting that big, heavy gauge hook through all that plastic and getting a hook in them. But I never really was happy with kind of my hookup ratio with those in smallmouth. So I was like, man, I'm going to try this nose hook thing. So the way I do it, and I'll share the advantages of it here in a second, but essentially I use a 2-aught Gamakatsu wide gap finesse hook. So this is like, most of you guys would probably use this for like a wacky rig. You could probably use it for drop shot, and I've used drop shot hooks before, but the gap's a little narrower. I like that like wide gap. And then all I do is with the fluke, I'm going to call the flat side the bottom and the rounded side of the top. So I go through the bottom side. So you're going to basically hold it with the bottom side up. You're going to take the hook and you're going to go back about the half of the distance of the gap of the hook. So I would say that's probably like 1/4 to 1/2 inch, and then you're basically gonna make a hole and just bring it through like that. That's it. I mean, that's about as simple as it gets, right? The reason why this is special and why it's different is, one, you're moving the pivot point on the hook forward, right? So when this is going through the water, this is going to have like just a different type of action. When you're jerking it, it's going to be more erratic. So moving that pivot point forward, it makes it more erratic. It also, if you look, like when I hold this, there's no hook in the center of the bait. So like when you have a 4/0, 3/0 hook in here, like it makes that whole center of the bait like stiff and rigid. So when you're working this without that, it's like whipping around a lot more. So it's a lot more action. And then also the way the weight of the fluke is, this hook's just enough to get this bait to sink like perpendicular. So it like sinks like at a perfect rate. And the way I fish it, you can fish it kind of up top if you want to, and that's what I see flukes tend to do more with a wide gap hook, is they'll kind of like want to come up and like skip on top. This does a really good job, almost like a suspending jerkbait. It like will dive and it will get down a little bit deeper. So you can fish this anywhere from like a foot under the water to like 5 or 6 feet pretty easily. And when you're jerking it 5 or 6 feet down, it's staying down. So it's something like, I fish this anywhere from, yeah, go ahead.
What do you do for retrieval on that? Do you burn pause in a river? Or
Jeff was asking that question. I had him up 10-0 on the river the other day, just for the record. So he was getting a little frustrated with this. But I fish with this like 90% of the time that I fish. So this is like something, I don't have a cadence for it. And that's what I was trying to tell him, because he was like, yeah, what's your cadence? It's very like erratic. And I think that's kind of the like beauty of this, right? There's no, like when you think of fishing like a suspending jerkbait, right? There's usually like, you have kind of almost like a robotic action. You're just like jerk, and you're counting, to 3 or 4 or whatever. This, I'm like, I'll jerk it, and then depending on where I see that bait, like let's say there's a rock, a big boulder, I'll just like kill it, and I'll just let it drift down. And it, a lot of times in a river, like the current will kind of pull it down under stuff, and then I'll, pull it up. Another thing I do that's kind of weird, when I throw it in a spot, and I don't even know how I got to doing this, to be honest. I think just like out of habit. So, yeah.
On that fish, on the fluke, first of all, does size matter in regards to what you use? So it's always going to be the same for small fish, big fish, whatever you're going to find. And the second question, you started with this happening just 2 weeks of the year. This is not yet the 2 weeks of the year.
No, this is year round.
All right.
I fish with this, like, I've caught fish in the middle of winter with it, like dead sticking it. But I would say it shines like post spawn to like all the way up until late fall. That's probably like when it's like most effective.
It's pretty good right now.
Yeah, it's post spawn. Yeah.
What's your preferred leader material? Do you fish in fluoro leader?
Yeah, I usually run braid to fluoro. It's got a little bit shorter leader because I was too lazy to tie on a new leader yesterday. But I usually use on a spinning setup. I like a 7-foot medium light or medium, depending on what river you're in. When I fish Susquehanna, I use a medium because those fish are just nasty and mean, and I need a little extra like juice for them. But I usually will tie like a 7-foot fluoro leader, so 12-pound fluoro. I use like FC Sniper, and then I usually have 20-pound braid on my spinning setups. But what I was getting at with the kind of action of it, a lot of times, so I'm like targeting visual areas. I'll throw it, like to Jeff's point, in like a shady spot, and instead of like killing it in the spot, I'll like burn it where it kind of like almost like, like a swim bait, and then I kill it right outside the area. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's like the erratic sort of motion with it, it like will draw them out of a spot like that, just with that like kind of fast action. Yeah, so
Can I comment on like the funnest part of and he coached me on this very specifically yesterday. The funnest part of it is the visual strike detection.
Yeah.
You're watching this bright white thing down in there, and sometimes you see the fish flash and turn on it, but sometimes all you see is the white is gone, and you need to set the hook. You may not know there's a fish there, but if you don't see your bait, it's time to set the hook. And that to me is a lot of fun. And that kind of goes back to me as a 8-year-old kid watching a bobber. It's the same thing. You're looking at a thing, waiting for a thing to happen. When it happens, fish off.
Yeah, and it definitely shines more in clear water too. So that if I can't see my fluke when I'm like fishing it, like even when it's down, like I don't mind fishing a little deeper where I can't see it, because you can feel them hit it most of the time. But I like kind of what Jeff said. I like that visual. Like if it gets down to like 4 or 5 feet, I can usually still kind of see the white, and when it disappears, I know that's like a hook set.
Hook sets are free.
Yeah, for sure. So honestly, like that's a subtle technique, it's a subtle change to like how a lot of people fish flukes that is like really effective. I would describe it as like it's kind of in the middle ground between like a finesse and a power technique. So you have like chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, you know, buzzbaits, crankbaits, those like things you're just like covering water with. And then you have finesse, which is like bottom bouncing, you know, drop shotting, that sort of thing. That's kind of like in the middle. So it covers the middle of the water column. And I've won a lot of tournaments on that before. It's really, really good technique. It does there is a lot of nuance with it. So if you use it, like just pay attention to how the fish are reacting to it. You can change up how you're fishing it like in the middle of the retrieve, which is kind of the beauty of it, right? It's not like, you know, a crankbait or something you're pulling in, yeah, you can like pause it, but if the fish doesn't commit, you'll usually just see him, you know, swim off. That thing, you can kind of coax him into biting it. If you see him like following it, like yesterday I threw that dumb mag draft. I probably had like 40 follows yesterday, and there's really nothing I could do. I mean, you can kill mag draft, but it looks like crap when it's falling. This thing, if you let it fall, like it, you know, kind of does that, and that's when you get a lot of those eats. So it's a cool technique. If you guys want to learn any more about it, come over and check out my setup. So moving on to the next thing. So this is kind of my subtle thing that I said the fish are doing right now. So have you guys ever seen have you guys ever seen this photo? That's me. So I caught that fish like 30 miles from here, so on the Muskegon River. So how many of you guys have ever been out on the river and like seen a huge smallmouth swimming around in like 6 inches of water, and you're like, what are you doing here? You guys raise your hands. How many of you guys have seen that? How many people have actually caught him when you see him doing that? Yeah, it's pretty hard to do, right? And most of the time it's because they see you before you see them, and by the time you like notice them, they're gone, right? So I had seen this over the like couple summers, and it was always around the same time of year. I was like, what in the world are these smallmouth doing? It's after they're spawned, so they're not like looking for spawning errors or anything. And I like, what is going on? And it took me like, I think it was like 3 years ago, I caught my first fish doing it, and I finally figured it out. I was like, this is what they were doing. So if you guys let's see if I can play this here. This is through my polarized glasses, so I don't know if you can see this. Anyone know what that is? Can you tell?
The beds, it would switch back.
Oh yeah, it's sunfish beds.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Right? So after smallmouth spawn, they're spawning areas. Usually, I mean, I'm sure it differs in like different regions of the country or river systems or whatever, but like usually it's like right after smallmouth spawn, sunfish move in and spawn in the exact same places. And the like that's one of them I caught on the doing that. I think that might have been the first fish that I caught doing it. It was a 20, and that scenario I was. What's that?
No big deal.
Well, I was in a drift raft, Smith fly type of thing. I was up on, we have a little platform on it, and I was kind of looking, and I saw 2 20-inch smallmouth swimming towards us, and I was like, oh my god. So I had a fluke on, of course, and I just like ripped it right in front of their faces before they got close enough to see us, and both of them just boom, just crashed into it. I caught one, and I was like, what were those fish doing? And I went up, it was like 6 inches of water, sandy, nothing. Went up there, and there's about 10 of those little sunfish beds. So I was like, oh. And then after we figured that out, we caught like, I don't know, we had mid-90s that day of just like doing that, nothing but doing that. We didn't fish anywhere else. We're just standing up, visual, looking for smallmouth, and you see like two or three dark, big figures, and just throw at them, and they're so aggressive. So that's like something that I feel like I had no idea that they predated on sunfish. You know, like I've never really seen a smallmouth with the sunfish in their, but every single one since then that I've caught doing that are big. They're like 18 or above. So I haven't seen like the little smallmouth do it, and probably because sunfish are too big of forage for those like little guys to eat. It's always the big fish. So like when you're out, it's usually post spawn, sunny days, because it's hard to see them if it's like cloudy out. Sunny days, stand up in your kayak. Standing up is like completely underrated, by the way. I know everybody likes to use pedal drives and foot control motors. That is the like best thing you can do in a tournament in kayak fishing is stand up. Stand up, get on your seat if you can in certain times. If you have a stable enough kayak, like get up as high as you can and look, because when you are in areas where it's clear enough water you can visually see, you can pick smallmouth off like that, and it is really fun to do. You know, if you see a smallmouth eat your lure, that's like one of the most fun things that you can do. So that's really all I got, guys. Anybody have like questions about that? Pretty simple stuff. What's that?
What is what you're casting for that kind of bass?
Smallmouth.
The ones that are on the sunfish?
Like what am I using?
Bluegill.
Or what are they eating, or what am I?
Yeah, what are they eating? What you use for casting?
Oh,
gotcha.
honestly, it doesn't matter. I mean, the thing is, like, when they move into one of those areas, a lot of the sunfish will go away, but the sunfish will come back. So they're in that like predatory mode. They're like looking for something to eat. If you throw something there, it doesn't matter. Ned rig, you know, whatever. They're gonna just hammer it because they're like in that like I want to eat mode. So the key with that is like any visual smallmouth in clear water, it's gonna be like you got to see them before they see you, because if they see you, you're done for. And to Jeff's talking about shadows, mind your shadow, because like them seeing you standing up is a thing, but they see shadows more than anything. You think about like predators for smallmouth, like an osprey or something like that. What do they see? Like when a bird's flying over, they see a shadow, right? So if they see your shadow, your boat shadow, pay attention to the angle of the sun. You know, get your shadow out of the way, because that's the best way to kind of keep you out of their line of sight. So, and their eyes are on the side, so keep in mind too. You're, on the side of them, they can see really well. So, but yeah, thanks guys.
What's your favorite color? What's your secret color for a flute?
I use black, white, and albino shad. I don't have no other colors of flutes. So,
No
yeah.
paint?
Bubble gum I used to. I haven't used bubble gum in a long time. For largemouth. So,
Did you show the video?
yeah, I did. So we're good.
Nice.
Thanks guys.
All right, guys.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Josh. I think is my mic on, Jake? Is my mic working? You got it on there? I think it's on. I think I turned it on, but I could be wrong.
No.
Not on.
Yes, it's on.
What is it? Oh, cool. All right, we're good to go. So I will talk about some of my subtle things. I got some videos I want to share with you guys as well, so hopefully you guys can see the screen okay. Before I forget though, as I heard the last thing Josh was saying, also don't forget their eyes are on the side of the head, but I don't know if you guys know how many degrees can a bass see in? Like, 360 degrees is full, so how many degrees can a bass see when they're... we obviously can only see whatever this is, right? I can't see.
guess 300. That's actually
Who else?
180.
It's 350 degrees. So it doesn't even matter if you're on the side of them. They can see all the way around because their eyes are all the way, they're bugged out. And the only place they can't see is a 10-degree cone. Where?
Right behind it.
It's actually,
right where the lamprey's
little
at.
split. Depends on who you talk to, but most people say it's the cone like directly in front of them. Maybe it's 5 degrees in front and 5 in back. But it's like, but the reason, if you ever bed fish for a bass and they back up a little bit before they eat it, because they can't see it. And if it's right close to, they're so close to their nose, they can't see it, which is then, yeah, their mouth is so big enough and they suck water in, so they don't have to be, once they're that super close to something, they've already committed, open their mouth, they know they're on it from both their eyes, honing it. But yeah, it's like 5 degrees there, but some people say they can see all the way in the back of their tails and it's just a 10-degree cone in front of them. But either way, it's a good one to remember. I'm going to talk about some subtle things that I've learned, because a big bass, you guys have all caught, I'm sure, some really big bass. So go back and think about the biggest bass you've caught, and eventually after you've caught enough of them, you start to learn that some of these biggest ones are acting and living a little bit different lives than the places you go out here under, at this marina or bridge or this section of lily pads you find, you just catch a lot of cookie cutters, right? Same size. Like, and it's like, what's that definition of insanity? You keep doing the same thing over and over and you think it's gonna, but so I think you're just gonna randomly sometimes get and there may be times where you might get this random 22, 21 inch giant smallmouth in the middle of that, but that's not typically the case. They kind of live a different life, and you guys aren't on the coast, but redfish, if you guys know anything about redfish, they live and they spawn in the marsh, the shallow marsh, and then once they get to a certain age, maybe around 30 inches, whatever it is, Jeff, you may know if it's 32 or around there, they're called a bull red. They become an adult and they go where? Out to the ocean. They never even, other than I think to spawn, they're out in the main ocean the rest of their lives. And they live just completely different, and they get huge. So think about a big smallmouth or largemouth, doesn't matter. Think about them in a way that, like, when you're targeting them in a tournament or just for fun fishing, you actually, like, everything has changed. Like, in your setup, you're always going to get your line, rod, reel, setup, everything for the biggest fish you hope to catch, right? Don't gear up. Like you were saying, you hope to catch these giants on the Susquehanna, so he uses a little bit beefier setup because he knows what's there. You always want to make sure, because the weakest link in any chain is, the weakest point in any chain is the weakest link. So you always want to gear up for what you dream to catch in your wildest dreams, not like what you averagely catch. So keep that in mind too, because when you do finally get that big one to commit, you don't want to obviously them to get off, right? You want the line, the proper line, the rod, reel, the whole setup, a sharp hook, you want that stuff to be there. So those are a couple things before I get started, just to remind you guys on. But I'm going to show you guys, so we all know the obvious locations, right? So let me show you an obvious location. So this video here is pretty obvious. Fish like to live around the bank, a lot of fish, right? So I get my kayak pretty close to the bank where I can move my rod over so I can parallel structure being the bank right here. And then right there at that point, and I'm a little further away than I'd even like to be, quite frankly, but my bait was able to come across that point. That's obvious, right? I mean, you fish the bank. What may not be obvious here is actually that I love to fish. I don't love, but I mean, a lot of times I do love to do a float trip from point A to point B. And you'll notice I was working my bait, how? Was I working it upstream, downstream? It was upstream. I'm floating downstream. Yeah, I'm working upstream. And some people say, well, that's crazy. Like, aren't you supposed to present stuff downstream naturally? And I'm like, what do you mean naturally? Who's ever seen a shad or a bluegill or a bass or anything swim upstream also? Do fish move upstream? Yeah. Absolutely. They move everywhere, every direction. So natural isn't, and we've already established how many degrees can they see it?
36 degrees.
So what do you think happens? Even if a fish happens to be facing upstream, which could be common, right? Or up current, I should say, up current. Currents swirl the other direction, so they want to be more up current, but a lot of times currents are swirling downstream too, so they're facing actually the opposite way, not upstream, but downstream. So they want to be up current. Sometimes they're tucked back into like an undercut on a bank, and they're just facing out from that root, the roots and the undercuts there, so they're facing kind of like perpendicular with the current, right? But they can see in 360 degrees. So I want a parallel structure and bank, and obviously it's easy to throw behind, I'll finish playing that, behind the obvious boulders and things like that. But I think you guys got that, right? I mean, if you didn't got it, you got it now. Like, even if you're working downstream, hug the bank as tight as you can to work your baits, top waters upstream. The only caveat is certain baits do need to be worked from downstream throwing upstream. A crawfish jig or a Ned rig or something like that, or a fluke's usually is a little bit better unless you're working on the surface, because certain baits you actually work better upstream, some work worse upstream. So it has more to do with the technique you're fishing than it's natural or not natural. Does that make sense? So a spinnerbait's going to want to rise really high coming back upstream. So but a buzzbait is actually going to surface easier and better throwing it downstream and bringing it upstream because it's got the current helping it rise. So some baits will be easier, some will be harder. A topwater like a buzzbait or a chopo is pretty good to work. So that's why I was using that one there. So just to show you guys, let's see, like this is an obvious spot. I just want to cover a couple obvious things. So there's a boulder right there. You see that boulder in the water? Okay, it's the only boulder right there. I mean, of course you're going to throw behind it in that calm spot, right? Yeah. All right, so we're going to talk about stuff that's not this obvious. Although one thing I do want to share, it's pretty cool. This is an obvious boulder right there. All right, let me set the stage here. We're breaking down game film. This is like NFL, you know what I mean? Like college, we're breaking down some game film. So there's two big boulders right here. The water's coming this way. This fish behind this boulder right here, if there's a fish there, he's most likely behind that boulder because he's taking it easy. We learned how to get our food as easy as possible. That's why we developed fast food chains, things like that, right? So we don't have to go hunt our food and chase down the deer or whatever. It's much easier just to go through the drive-thru. Every species on this planet has learned the easiest possible way to actually get their food, right? Which gives us our energy and all that. So behind these boulders, that's like somewhere we can visibly see is a current break. It's obvious for us, so we're definitely gonna hit these going down the river. Definitely gonna hit them. But you may make a bad cast like I do here every once in a while, and when you make a bad cast, even on a good cast, every fish catch is telling you something. You gotta treat fishing like your brain is like AI. Every fish you've ever caught, hopefully you've taken a little piece of information from it and put it all together. You're gonna see how eventually you'll be on a situation tomorrow or a new body of water, and your brain will just spit it back out. Oh yeah, I remember this, this, and this, So I learned something from this fish catch, even though I made a bad cast and I caught this. I'm gonna cast it. Usually you want to throw like actually over the boulder and upstream of the boulder on it with the topwater floating bait like a chopo, like I'm using here. And then it's an easy cast to make usually because you don't have to be accurate at all. You can just simply use your reel. Once you've cast it way past the boulder, way upstream, you can kind of time it and go a little quicker and just get it to where it goes right behind that boulder. But sometimes it doesn't work out. So I'm backing myself into position, so I'm kind of still before I make this cast. And then I'm ready to go. So I want it to lay way, like my line to go over and upstream, and it does, but not quite as much as I wanted it to. So when I start working it, even if I try to go quick, it's going well past that boulder. Bummer, but watch this fish bite right about here. So it bit, I'll rewind it bit, once it got past that, you'll see the way the bait works. It's going pretty quick, and all of a sudden it hits that calm spot of water, right? And then it's going in a straight direction this way, and then it picks back up, and that's when the fish hits. Okay, so that's kind of the way it happened. But if they're in that calm spot, like it would have seen it coming, it would have bit right when it got to that calm spot. That's just the way aggressive river fish are. It didn't, it waited till it got, so in my mind, with how swift this water is, I'm almost confident, like 100% confident the fish came from right behind the boulder where I was trying to get my bait to go, right behind that boulder. So what do we learn from this? I learned that the water clarity on this day and the water temperature, which helps dictate their metabolism and how aggressive they are, this is very, very critical. You guys to pay attention to your water clarity on each day, and where you get bit. Because I missed my cast, but he bit, let's say that's 15 feet from that boulder. I now know a bass in this river can see a prey within 15 feet and chase it down. And why does that matter though? Well, it matters because there's boulders all under the water that you cannot see. And then when you're fishing downstream in the laminar flow section, these are kind of calmer, like medium flow, and they've got some boulders, some not, but not like turbulence. When you're fishing and you're fan casting, trying to find little ledges and drop-offs and things like that, you now know how many feet apart should I be making if you're fan casting and you're a clock, you're the center of that clock, and this is like 12 o'clock, and this is 1:30, and this is 3 o'clock. How many feet apart should I cast? Now that I know, I'm very confident, a fish can see my bait and go and charge it and hit it within a 15-foot distance. 30. A lot of people miss that one. They always say, oh, 15, 30. So if I cast here, my next cast when I'm fan casting in open areas without obvious, this is subtle stuff, right? Subtle boulders underneath the water because they create current breaks too, right? Yeah, absolutely. So, and you want to, just fan cast, but you're wasting your time if you fan cast at 12 and 12:15 and 12. You know what I mean? You already know, and once you know what I mean, that this fish in this river on this day, they'll go 30, like basically 30 feet distance because they can travel 15. So if your bait's in the middle, 15 feet on this side, 15 feet on this side. So that's why I always try to think of things like that. And the more efficient you are during the day when other anglers are making more casts than they should in an area with again, this is like power fishing aggressive baits. Might be a little different if you're sitting there working a jig or a Ned rig on the bottom. But for my style of fishing, which is very fast, I'm trying to cover and get all these aggressive fish like that. I don't care about the fish that, yeah, maybe they're there, and maybe they're on live scope, and maybe you can see them, but if they don't bite right away, I don't even care about them, because I'd rather go find fish like this that I can fool. So, what happened here? Let's get this back going. All right, so I'll finish this fight. And this is like an 18-inch something fish. I think I cold it out later in the day. Helped me win the KBF Pro Series on Lake Champlain. So, good fish. Not a giant fish, but you get the point, right? About subtle stuff and obvious stuff. So another one I got here is, I want to show you guys real quick. This one I do, it's another kind of obvious thing, and I'm going to get to subtle, but what's subtle is my movement right here is what's subtle. Most people don't do a draw stroke like I just did, so I want to make sure I mention this right here. A draw stroke, even if you have a motor, guys, a motor cannot move you directly sideways, right? It can't do that. You got to be moving forward to move right or left. A draw stroke can pull you, this side to this side, directly sideways. You want your boat to be very close to the bank, so you can have just a rod tip's length, or rod length, to move it to the right and keep your bait right along that undercut bank the entire way. Now again, I'm fortunate that fish bit, right there at that tip, that point, kind of similar to that last video I just showed you guys, right? Kind of a little point jutted out. And this was I just horsed it in. I saw it was hooked really good. It was a 20-inch, I think it was a little over 20 inches of smallmouth in that same tournament, actually, on a different river. So you can see, just for the sake of seeing a fish, I'll show the fish there. So nice fish, solid 20 something inch, but without the proper boat positioning and keeping your bait always in that strike zone, always parallel in that structure, keeping it close as possible, and it forces them to, here. Oh, okay, did you catch that? Oh, thanks, man. So the fact that you just caught my phone, a bass doesn't have hands, so what are they gonna do when they're forcing them to react? They're gonna, and they don't know what it is, what's coming by. When I was a kid, I would clean bass with my dad and they'd have sticks in their belly. Why? Because they just reacted as fast as possible, because other bass were next to them potentially, and the competition got to them and they never spit it out. But usually, you guys have seen bass, I'm sure, or if you have fish in an aquarium, have you ever seen them like eat something in your aquarium and then they spit it out? If a bass doesn't like something or it's not real, they're just gonna spit it out. So you're just causing them to react, and you got hooks, so they can't. Hopefully, they don't pop it out of the water and you get them, right? So the key is that boat positioning, that subtle boat positioning, keeping that bait there is forcing them to react, because they don't always, like that first fish I just showed you that went 15 feet, they don't always chase it down and eat like that. And especially the biggest ones that are harder to fool, you actually need to get them to ambush and react fast without even knowing what just happened. That's how you do it. Big baits, just loud baits, just accurate casts. But one of the main parts of this seminar, really, that I can't ever, we can tell you information all day long, but nobody can make you a better caster than yourself. The actual coordination, athletic part of the sport, that's on you guys. And that is probably one of the things whenever I'm out there fishing and catching fish and I make this incredible cast or something, I'm like, I bet a lot of people probably just couldn't even actually done that, boat positioning wise and cast wise. So when you get better at that, you're getting a leg up on the competition. When you combine it with the knowledge, you're even getting further. You know, you've shaved even more hair off your body for the Olympic swimmer analogy, right?
Question on that.
Yeah, remember.
I've got the pleasure of fishing with Drew because you can't get rid of it, right?
My father-in-law. So.
And the fact is that we can be together on the river and he can be casting right where I'm casting and he's catching big fish and catching shit. So, the 15 feet distance may be true, but the being accurate on your cast means a lot. And what does it matter? Because I see you many times and you put it right on the shore.
Yeah.
And if you don't catch a fish within 2 seconds, you bring it up to a fish.
Yes.
Why does the location mean so much sometimes?
Well, because we're targeting, and my style is targeting fish that it's really cool because you don't need fish finders, you don't need live scope. I've won all the trophies that I've done without any of that stuff. No fish finders, no live scope, no motors for the longest time until I just got one when they switched to designated launches because it's kind of hard to like get away. You know, you need a motor at that point, right? But the point is, it's really fun because it's an imaginary like sort of situation in your head. You imagine a fish is on that stump or on that rock or in that undercut bank. So it's all visual, and you're just literally just. I've done this so much that your bites come. Well, I would say 90-something% of my bites come when I'm doing visual targets in the first few cranks of the handle. Like it's like the first, I'd say 20% of the cast. And once I've gotten if you work a bait all the way back to the boat, now some of you guys are gonna say, I caught a fish right at the boat one time. Cool, that's great, we all have. But while you were working the rest of your entire day, when you were working your 75% of your cast slowly back in and you weren't getting bit, I was making 10 times more casts where I was getting the first 25% where they're gonna bite on you. I was gaining on you because that one time you got one fish right at the boat. And it depends on kind of what you're fishing, obviously, but where I'm talking like structure, boulders, banks, stuff like that, I will work the bait typically back to the boat when I'm parallel on the bank, but my next cast, I'm not covering the same water again at all. I've moved forward more, and my next cast is pretty much all clean new water I haven't hit. So that's the key. You just gotta like be very super accurate. I actually do hit the bank with a lot of my baits, like single hook baits like chatterbaits, spinner baits, buzz baits, stuff that has a single hook, which is what I mostly throw. Swim baits, hit the bank a lot of times, and then roll it in just because if there's nothing that's going to get you really hung up, especially those single hook baits, it's just easier to hit the bank or the log and just like loop, plop it right over. Because then at least you're not 2 feet short where you may not get the bite. At least I know, and every once in a while you might get hung up, but if you don't just set the hook into the log, it's probably just gonna like flip right over, and you can just kind of dangle it and shake it and get it right over, and then boom, right, they're right there. So they're tucked in pretty tight. So that was a good question, Ramon. All right. Did not type in the right password. So now let's go to another. I could just probably do all three of these at one time. This is just really quick, subtle. Subtle sometimes means getting through some stuff that other people don't, and it's not so subtle to actually get through some of the stuff, but it's just, this is in Wisconsin, the rules, and this is in a tournament, you got to stay in your kayak, right? You can't get out. Having the right small kayak, this is the Crescent Ultralight. The Crescent Shoaly that I designed is pretty darn small and lightweight. You can get under and through stuff that other people can't, and then get to some just fresh, clean fish that nobody else has fished for, whether tournament anglers or just public, because unless you see chainsaw there with, the tree's been sawed down, you're in a section now that's kind of your own. So things like that, going underneath a tunnel like this, I love to find little sneaky places like that because it's a little extra work, it's a little extra effort and energy. And if there again, this tunnel, I don't remember if I had to do it here, but you have to like lay back down low in your seat just to get under it, And so it's pretty wild, the stuff in places that I'll go explore. And a lot of times it's a dead end, it is. But sometimes it works out. And actually this one here, as you can see I'm laying down, I actually This is actually on Lake Gunnerville. It's not even, well, there could be smallmouth there, but it's more of a largemouth spot, but you get the idea. But yeah, it did really well there in the tournament. A couple good fish came from that little bit of water on the other side of the interstate. So here's one of the main ones I was going to show you guys today, and we'll wrap this up fairly soon with some questions. Okay, we already seen the parallel of the bank, and it was a nice undercut bank. But this bank here is kind of sloping, like it's clay and sloping more gentle. You can tell, you can imagine, right, that there's just not anywhere for them to hide. There's no undercuts. So you're gonna go faster. You're gonna fish through those areas a lot faster and just move till you get to some better looking stuff. However, do you guys see this right here? A little disturbance. There's a little line, you can see it if I get up there, right there. There's a little disturbance in the water, okay? So most people, and if you're standing like Josh said, you know, you'll see this stuff a little easier sometimes, but when I'm seated and working on with my motor, sometimes it's easier to be seated working the torpedo. So I'm seeing a subtle disturbance on the surface. Something had to make that disturbance, right? It's either a boulder or a log or a root ball. So I'm not gonna throw at it, right? Like, of course, I'm moving my way up. So how many other people you think some of the disturbances are seeing those, reading the water and seeing them and casting at them? Not all the anglers, right? You guys now know this stuff if you didn't know it already, so maybe you are, but most people aren't. So they're gonna miss out on some fish. So again, you're picking up a little bit here, a little bit there, from this tip, from that tip. The next thing you know, your 5 fish limit is your floor for a tournament, your floor, which is what, you know, tournament fishing's all about. There it goes, I'll back it up. Tournament fishing, only one person can win, guys, so you want to increase your floor, and that means like the lowest, even if you don't finish in the money, at least you got good AOI points or whatever. Always trying to increase that floor. Little things like this can help you get there, but I want to show you guys real quick. Pay attention to when it gets to that subtle disturbance. This fish, here comes my bait right there. You can see the bait. It's getting close, it's getting close. Boom. She comes off, and then later on I went and looked and it was a log. There was a log there that just had fallen in, and it was big enough where a fish could hide in it. So, and once I assessed that they're hooked pretty good with 2 hooks on the top water, I boat flip them. But usually, if it's only 1 hook, a lot of times I'll belly flip them or whatever. But that was like, I don't know, 18 maybe, 18 something. And then here's another sneaky one. How about limbs laying over in the middle of the creek? Now I'll give you guys that identifier code here in just a second. We'll wrap up, get you that code. But in the middle of the creek, you see those limbs overhanging. Sometimes they'll actually get in the like where the limbs are touching, the leaves are touching. Not all the time, but you're not going to throw at it when you see it. You know, the last tournament I fished on Lake Gunnersville for Bassmaster, had a pretty good finish. I caught a big largemouth, like a 19 something, on some limbs that were hanging down on a crappy looking like clay bank that was narrow, and this smallmouth here hit. And I'm moving a little bit with the current, so you got to obviously now you got that situation where you better decide what's the latest point I can make a cast at this thing that I'm getting pushed into. And I'm like, all right, I just got to get this thing in fast. And so I rarely use a net, but I did have one on this trip, so I got it in, then quickly turned my kayak upstream and got out of there, as you can see. But I'm trying to think that's about it, guys. So
You always been a river fisherman guy, or you?
Pretty much just a river fisherman guy, river creeks, and I'll show one more clip and I'll let you guys roll, because this is a laminar flow, so this kind of brings it full circle to Jeff's video. So you can see there's no disturbances on the surface, no boulders visible, it's nothing, right? But it's kind of a pebbly bottom, and a little sandy and pebbly here. The only thing you see is a tree right there above my head, if I can see it, right there. There's a tree limb there, and there's a little subtle disturbance there. If I can jump and get that. So, what do you think that subtle is? Noticing the direction those tree limbs are laying, what do you think that subtle disturbance is right there?
A log.
A log, yeah. So, what that is the root ball. The actual roots of that tree is what that subtle disturbance is. So, when I'm going to miss this fish, see, I'm going to throw over it because I see that subtle disturbance. I'm going to get kind of close to it. And boom, I got nailed by a giant and I missed it. So, but Up here is a little bit swifter water, and not like swift, but I mean like it's shallower. And any bridge, you know, you got like current at bridges. Well, when it goes from deep to shallow, it's like another constricting point. So it gets that laminar flow happens. It gets like moderate. You see little bubbles on the surface. Maybe you see some actual flow. When you get these deep sections, you don't even see flow. You're like, this is just not even moving. You want that laminar flow because it feels like a fan feels to you in the middle of the summer at a 100-degree day when you get a fan on your face and it feels so good. The wind, not so much like today. You know, if it was a little warmer, this wind would be awesome. But that's what that's what laminar flow, the oxygen content, the way it feels to a fish, and that is one reason I think they like to be in those zones, right? So you'll see I caught a fish. Some fish came out of schooling next to me and I just randomly threw over there and caught them. So I'm just paying attention all the time. But later on, guys, I fished my way down that bank. So you see those logs right here? Excuse me. Those two limbs, I'm on the other side of the river. That's the two limbs that we just saw in the other clip earlier. And I fished my way down that bank after I fished the middle and came back up. And you'll notice this current here when I play the video is kind of moving, you know, a little bit swifter, but then it gets calm in here. So there's a reason why that log stopped right there in the river, right? It's no longer swift there, as swift. It's a little bit deeper, a little slower, and there's a kind of a drop off. So it goes from that laminar flow to a drop off, and that log settled there. I know there's some fish in that zone in the middle of the river because I just obviously missed that one by that log, so I let them rest after I fished down and came back up. So now I'm going to throw some different baits. I'm going to eventually catch one, but the point is it doesn't look like much, right? I mean, all out over here to my right, even way above this log, not even near the log, in that laminar flow, you can find fish that are just kind of like stacked up, living on a little bit of a drop off in that laminar flow, a little bit of a ledge that gives them even more of a current break. And eventually I catch one here, probably the next cast. I think I missed one, and then I eventually catch it on chatterbait. I missed it on top water. Now I'm making those fan casts. See, I'm making these fan casts in that distance I was telling you guys about. So I think I just missed the blow up. Did I just miss it? But eventually I catch it on the chatterbait when I throw back. See, I'm lining it in already? Yeah. I've already covered the distance from my boat. It's already been covered by the previous cast. You know what I mean? As closer you get, that area of the river's already been covered. So now I'm throwing back in the same, with a different bait to try to get that same fish to bite that just missed my top water. Which you could throw a fluke back, which is a good bait, or Z-Man streaks, which is what I use. Here's where I actually get the bite, I think. So I'm just randomly making casts out there because I know there's fish in that zone. So it hooks up, and then of course my GoPro cuts off because you know how GoPros are. They always cut off in the middle of your fight. And then we'll wrap up with this last fish catch here. And so I kind of eventually got my revenge on that fish kind of somewhere in that zone. And there was a lot of fish loaded. That was a 20-incher as well. So. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll give you the code, is go to the bank with any big fish, go to the bank and make sure the left side of your kayak is up on the bank. You like lift your hip on the right, so the left side of your kayak goes up, get your paddle and shove that left side of your kayak on the bank because your bump board, they're facing to the left and they're gonna flop left if they go anywhere, so you want them to flop on the bank. You don't wanna lose a fish, obviously, if you can help it. Obviously, you can use a net on that side. People use that technique. I lift my leg up too, just to make sure, like, and obviously in that crescent kayak shoalie that I've got, which, you know, they carry them here, you can see them, there's a catchboard recess down there so they don't flop out as easy. So, but that's it, guys. If you have any questions, those are some cool subtle tips and techniques on where we catch them or how we catch them. And I appreciate Jeff, appreciate Josh, and all you guys. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, yeah. Cool. You guys ready to go in the water?